Hello all, welcome to another learning session. Today we are going to learn about Azure Virtual Desktop. So what is Azure Virtual Desktop? Azure Virtual Desktop is a fully managed VDI solution from Microsoft. You can provision desktop VDIs as well as published applications from Microsoft Azure portal. AVD is completely free for the Microsoft 365 users. When I say free, let us consider other VDI products like Citrix or VMware. You need to pay for the licenses to run the Citrix or VMware VDIs. However, since the control plane is completely managed by Microsoft, they are actually giving this service as free of cost. Azure Virtual Desktop has another interesting feature called as Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session. In an on-premise world, if you want to run multiple users in an operating system, then you need to use a server operating system. Microsoft has changed the game. They basically made this multi-session capability in Windows Desktop OS. However, you can only run Windows 11 or Windows 10 multi-session OS in Azure. They made great optimization for Office 365 and Microsoft 365 traffic. They enabled OneDrive support, Outlook cache support in the AVD environment. AVD is pretty simple. You can deploy and scale the environment within minutes. Microsoft has created AVD environment in such a way that it can be accessed from any device and from anywhere in the globe. With that, let us basically understand how the AVD works. As any product, AVD basically contains an infrastructure layer or a control layer, and it has your resource layer where your VMs reside. So the control layer, which includes your web server, SQL server, controller, license server, your monitor server, all these are managed by Microsoft. These components are hosted in Microsoft Data Center, Microsoft Managed Azure environment. What you will be managing is the actual AVDs or session host or the virtual machines which you are basically provisioning VDIs to end users. You need to always also manage the profiles via the profile management solution. What are the prerequisites to host AVD? From an infrastructure point of view, you need an Azure subscription, you need Azure Active Directory, you need a hybrid AD or an ADDS. The new AVD desktops supports Azure AD only environment. So even if you don't have a hybrid domain or an on-premise AD, you can still host your AVDs. From a license requirement point of view, if you have Microsoft 365 license suite, then you are entitled to use AVD without any additional cost. However, if you are running server operating system via as an AVD desktop or an AVD published application, then you need to buy the additional RDS CAL licenses. So that's where your Windows desktop multi-session OS will come into picture because Windows desktop multi-session OS doesn't need CAL licenses. So you are actually saving a lot of money by using Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session desktop OS. What are the supporting operating system for AVD? AVD support Windows 11 Enterprise, Windows 11 Enterprise multi-session, Windows 10 Enterprise and Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. It supports server OS like from starting from 2012 to 2022. AVD was supporting Windows 7 during the COVID time, but they stopped it. What is the logical architecture of AVD, right? So, if you basically talk about the architecture, you have two architecture. One is your technical architecture, and then one is basically how the AVD is placed logically. Let us basically learn about how AVD is placed logically. AVD, from a admin view, it contains three components. One is basically the host pools. Host pools are nothing but they are basically a group of machines. So, for example, you create a host pool to have Windows 10 desktops. You create a host pool to have Windows 11 multi-session desktops. So, uh, to summarize, host pool is basically a group of machines, and you basically apply all your policies, your redirections, restrictions, all those things in your host pool level. Then you have application groups. What is application group? Application group is basically a logical grouping of applications and desktops. For example, let us assume that you need to publish some five applications to the finance users. You will create an application group for finance users and publish these five applications. Or if you want to publish a desktop specifically to the IT admins, so you will basically create another application group and basically give the access to the admins. Your access user assignment or your access assignment will be done in the application group level. The last comes your workspace. So you have your host pools, you have your application groups, and then when a user login, right? Let us assume that you have a finance, a person who is basically part of finance as well as IT, and when he log in, how he will basically differentiate what is my finance application, how what is my IT applications. That's where your workspace come into picture. Workspace is basically a logical grouping of application groups, and workspace is what the end user will basically see when he basically log into the AVD portal. Last but not least, session host. Session hosts are nothing but the actual VDIs or the servers where you will be giving users access. How the AVD traffic flow works? As I mentioned earlier, AVD basically contains your control pane, which is basically managed by Microsoft, and it contains your resource pane, which is basically the VMs or session host, which is located in our subscription. So traditionally, same like any other VDI solution, when a user log into the AVD web page or AVD client, the user will basically get that web page if he log into the AVD web client, and user will be entering his user ID and password. That ID and password will get authenticated against your Azure AD. Once your credentials were validated against Azure AD, what will happen is your controller will basically check which particular desktop is assigned to this user, and then the broker will basically send that details to the user. So that's where you will basically see the published icons. And once user click on that published icon, the connection is basically happening via a gateway. So consider gateway is like your reverse proxy, or in simple terms, it basically convert your traffic into HTTPS. So your gateway will act as a middle layer. When an end user access it, it will basically reach your gateway for further traffic, and from there it will basically go to the session host desktop. Microsoft basically has announced something called as reverse connect. So what is reverse connect? We basically discussed about having the gateway as a middle layer where the traffic is flowing. The problem with that is you are actually having an additional hop where all the traffic will come to gateway and then go to the desktop or the session host. With reverse connect, you are basically eliminating the need of gateway. So you still have RD gateway or remote desktop gateway. However, what will happen is once the connection is established, it will basically bypass the gateway and the traffic will directly happen from your VDI session host to your client. So this basically, eliminate the need of your gateway and your connection will be more faster. Now we basically learned about what is AVD, how it works, what is the traffic flow, what is the logical architecture. Let us basically understand where you need to basically deploy your AVD infrastructure, or which Azure region will be the most optimal to deploy a AVD environment. So you have something called as experience calculator. When you run that experience calculator in your browser, what it does is it will basically search for your nearby region. For example, I run it from Bangalore, and it basically takes South India as my nearest location, which has 159 millisecond latency. And this again varies every minute because this depends upon our client network. So this is one way to basically decide which is the most optimal place or most optimal Azure region where you can host your AVDs. The another game changing item which Microsoft basically brought in with AVD is FS Logics. Many people got confused about FS Logics and how it works. FS Logics is a company which is acquired by Microsoft. What does that company do? They actually were pioneers of profile containers. So they basically made containerization of profiles. We will basically discuss about what is that. But FS Logics in simple terms, this is basically a company acquired by Microsoft, and they're having four products. They have something called as Office container, profile container, application masking, and Java version control. Now let us basically talk about a traditional roaming profile scenario. So what will happen when a user log into a VDI in the older terminology, right? When a user log into a VDI, his profile will be saved in a file share which is located somewhere in the network. And once when he log in, the files will basically load to the desktop very slowly because it depends upon the network speed and all, right? So if I have 1 GB of profile, then the 1 GB of profile need to be downloaded to the VDI before I log in. And your traditional roaming profile was not supporting things like OneDrive and Outlook cache because it used to cache your profile and it used to bloat your profile. So that's where your FS logics will come into picture. How FS logic works is instead of you basically have files copy when a user login, FS logics has converted your profile into containers or VHD files, and these VHD files will get attached when a user login. So let us assume that you attach a pen drive and accessing the data directly from pen drive, and you are basically copying the data from pen drive and then accessing it. There will be a difference, right? When you connect your pen drive and access it, that will be more faster than you copy the content into your local machine and then access. So that's how your FS Logics works. FS Logics is basically VHD files or containers. They will be attached and detached when a user login and logs out of the VDI. FS Logics has two containers. One is basically the profile container, which saves your profile data, and it has your Office container, which basically saves your Office data. When I say Office data, it includes your Teams cache, it includes your Outlook cache, it includes your OneDrive cache, OneNote, etc. FS Logic has other project products like app masking and Java version control. I'll be basically taking that in a detailed session in a later stage. Now let us basically talk about how can you access every desktop and application. Every desktops and applications can be accessed from any device. When I say any device, you can access it via a web client, you can access it via a Windows desktop client, you can access it via Mac, you have option to use Chrome OS, AVD supports Android, iOS. So it basically can be accessed from a variety of environments, even thin client as well. Now, does AVD fits for all use cases, right? Why people use Citrix Cloud plus AVD? So let us basically talk about Azure Virtual Desktop, or what all are the limitations of Azure Virtual Desktop. One is Azure Virtual Desktop is a Azure only solution. So your customer or you as a customer will be logged down to Azure, and you cannot use a multi-cloud solution. Let us assume that your applications are hosted in Google Cloud and your AVDs are in Azure. When you access it, there will be always a slowness because your traffic need to come to Colo and then go to the Google Cloud. So that's where your Citrix Cloud plus AVD integration comes into picture. Let us basically see what all are the differences between Citrix and AVD. So if I list down the key ones, the important ones are it supports multi-cloud. With the help of Citrix Cloud, you can actually integrate with AVD, you can integrate with AWS desktops, you can integrate with your Google Cloud, you can integrate with on-prem environment. Your end user experience, right? Uh, Very recently, AVD supports FAS, but earlier AVD was not supporting your single sign-on, and users need to basically access your credential two times before logging into a AVD session. However, Citrix they have the Citrix Federated Authentication service, which basically helps users to do a single sign-on to the end desktops. And your image management is another important thing. For example, once you create your AVD desktops, you basically cannot update it using a master image, right? You need to basically patch it using Intune, or you need to delete it and recreate new VMs. But in Citrix, as we all know, it basically support MCS and PVS, where you have your link clone concept. You basically update your master image and then just update the catalog. It will automatically update all your machines. So these all are some of the key reasons why people stick to Citrix, and people specifically go to Citrix Cloud plus AVD solution. So this is basically an architecture view of how your CVAD or your Citrix CVAD service connected with AVD. So you have your control plane where your Citrix gateway service and your Citrix VDIs reside. Then you have your cloud connector, which is basically the kind of a broker between your environment and Citrix, and then you can host your multi-session OS. So this is basically showing how a architecture works, and you can basically see that the advantage of using Citrix is you can have uh, multiple hosting locations, right? So in this diagram, it basically uses on-prem as well as the AVD Azure region. Hope this introductory video is informational to everyone. I'll be basically coming with a deep dive video of how AVD works. Till the time, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you.